This is a bonus episode, an anniversary special for this podcast. It's a story of the time that I, Narada Muni, tried to steal Krishna away from his wives, Satyabhama and Rukmini. And we'll see what is more valuable than all the gold and all the silver in a kingdom's treasury. Welcome to Stories from India. This is a podcast that will take you on a journey through the rich mythology, folklore, and history of the Indian subcontinent. I am Narada Muni, the celestial storyteller and the original Time Lord. With my ability to travel through space and time, I can bring you fascinating stories of the past, the present, and the future. From the epic tales of the Mahabharata and Ramayana to the folk tales of the Panchatantra, to stories of Akbar Birbal and Tenali Raman, I have a story for every occasion. The purpose of the stories is neither to pass judgment nor to indoctrinate. My goal is only to share these stories with people who may not have heard them before, and to make them more entertaining for those who have. First of all, thank you, dear listeners, for all of your support as Stories from India reaches two huge milestones. First, today marks 4 years since the start of this podcast. And second, it's also episode number 250. That is, if you include bonus episodes in that count. Despite having covered all the stories that we did, there are millions more stories to be told from Indian mythology, folklore, and history. And I couldn't be more excited to keep bringing them to you. We are still going to pick up on the Kathasarit Sagar story that I promised. That is still coming at the regularly scheduled time. Today, just as a thank you for your support through the last 4 years, I'll do a bonus episode featuring myself. Some of you asked a story about me, and others asked for a story about Krishna. So here we are in this bonus episode, which features both myself and Krishna. The story begins one fine day when I was visiting Dwarika. In these modern days, people may know that that is a city in Gujarat. But the version of Dwarika from a few millennia ago was much more spectacular than the touristy souvenir stalls, hotels, and restaurants that you may find there. Besides, these two Dwarikas aren't the same. The present day version is just the remnants of what sunk beneath the sea after Krishna passed away at the end of the Mahabharata. But unfortunately, there's no easy way to experience the beauty of that amazing city unless you're a time traveler like me. But it was not the majestic buildings in the city, its clever architecture, or the richness of its infrastructure that attracted me to the place. There was a much bigger draw, and that was Krishna. If you've been listening to this show, you probably know what a big fan of Vishnu I am. But if you haven't, and if you don't even know about Vishnu, let me quickly explain that he is the preserver of the universe. Together with Brahma the creator and Shiva the destroyer, the three of them are the Holy Trinity in Indian mythology. It's true that Brahma is my dad, but Vishnu is the one I'm a huge fan of. Vishnu has appeared on earth several times, but one of his most famous avatars is that of Krishna. Krishna had a massive palace in Dwarika. It needed to be massive because he had a pretty big family. He had 16,108 wives. That might be some kind of an all-time record. Pretty sure that Genghis Khan and Zeus are far, far behind. But I'd have to travel quite far into the future to double check that Krishna's record still holds. Anyway, amongst his 16,108 wives, there was a kind of a hierarchy. There were 8 primary wives that included Satyabhama and Rukmini and a bunch of others. It would take hours to name all 16,108 wives, so I'll only name the 2 that feature in today's story, Satyabhama and Rukmini. There was a friendly rivalry between the 2 of them. Who loved Krishna more? And whom did Krishna love more? That question was always up for debate. And today's story is no exception. I knocked on the door, and when it opened, I saw several of Krishna's wives at the door, with smiles on their faces. The smiles quickly faded as they realized who it was. "It's not the Amazon delivery guy," one of the disappointed wives called out. No doubt to her friends off screen in another room. "It's only Narad," she added. "Narad again? What does he want this time?" came a voice from the other room. Blimey, I was right there. I can't say that I was thrilled to hear that. But that's when Satyabhama stepped in. "Why, it's Narad. Come in, have some tea and samosas." She can be a very charming host. She knows and respects how much I'm devoted to Krishna. So, I sat in her garden, admiring the flowers, sipping the tea, and eating samosas, and chatting with Satyabhama. Truth be told, delicious as the samosas were, and pleasant as Satyabhama's company was, I'd have much rather preferred to be chatting with Krishna instead. But Krishna was busy just then, so Satyabhama informed me. She said he'd be free in a few minutes. And did I want more samosas in the meantime? Of course I wanted more samosas. I can never get enough of them. While we were waiting, the topic came about what Satyabhama could offer me on this visit. Now, you might think tea and snacks would be enough. But there was an important part of hospitality in ancient India that I must highlight. And it was an exclusive perk of being a sage. There was a tradition, a rule almost, that a visiting sage would be given something by their host. And usually, the sage got whatever they asked for. However, there is an equally strong tradition that the sage doesn't ask for anything unreasonable. Usually. There are exceptions, like Durvas. On this occasion, I decided to pull a Durvas and be rather unreasonable. I asked for Krishna. Yup, which meant that when I walked out of the palace and out of Dwarika, Krishna would have to go with me. Satyabhama was skeptical. Be serious, Narad. I can't really give you Krishna. But I was serious. It seems a bit of a wild idea, but not so much when you consider that Krishna could be in multiple places at once. We've seen that before in multiple stories about Krishna. So why couldn't I have my own personal version of Krishna to go with me everywhere I went? To be honest though, I did not expect it to really work. I just figured it was worth a shot. Satyabhama was now suddenly worried. The royalty code required her to do everything in her power to give me what I had asked for. But how could she give up her husband? Satyabhama was between a rock and a hard place. She asked me to wait and called an emergency conference of a few of her key right-hand women. These included a number of Krishna's wives, but not Rukmini. Remember what I told you earlier about their rivalry? While the wives were conferring, Krishna came in. "Hello, Narad," he greeted me politely, and then asked why Satyabhama was worried. When I explained, he only chuckled. No wonder, he knew exactly how this was going to turn out. If I travelled forward in time, I would have too. But sometimes it's good to live in the moment and experience the twists and turns of an evolving crisis, even though I completely understood that I was the one who had caused this present crisis. Satyabhama came back and said, "Narad, we've made a decision. We can't offer you Krishna, but we can offer you his equivalent in value." I was going to protest, but Krishna jumped in. "I'm sure Narad will gladly agree to that. Won't you, Narad?" Call me spineless, call me a sycophant, but I'm not ashamed to admit that I readily nodded my head. It's not that I blindly accepted Krishna's word. I had reasoned this out. Krishna had definitely seen the future, as evidenced by his chuckle earlier. He wouldn't intervene by suggesting something, unless not doing so was going to put either myself or his wives in an awkward position. So I played along. Satyabhama had some scales brought in. With a casual wave of his hand, Krishna magically changed the scales to balance the value of the objects, rather than just their weight. He sat on one of the pans, while Satyabhama had her maids bring in gold. It took a while for the maids to carry in the gold, but it was worth the wait. Pun intended. They had brought enough gold to easily be heavier than the heaviest person on earth. So, they probably wouldn't need it all. But they had got a substantial amount to avoid having to make multiple trips. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Satyabhama helped them, and some other junior wives joined in as well, in placing gold on the other scale. But to their surprise, no matter how much gold they placed, Krishna was much heavier. The maids made multiple trips after all, but still, Krishna remained heavier. One of the junior wives, probably the same one who had looked askance at me when I arrived, now turned her disapproving eye towards Krishna. "Have you thought about hitting the gym?" she asked him, quite rudely. "Wait a minute," Satyabhama suddenly interrupted. A junior wife asked what that even meant. How could they weigh a minute? Time has no weight. Satyabhama said to cut out all these poor jokes based on the homonymous words wait and wait. Satyabhama knew what was wrong here. It had to be the scales. But they tried with 2 gold coins and the scales balanced them perfectly. Then Krishna sat in the other pan, but the same thing happened. He was still clearly a lot heavier than all the gold. The disapproving junior wife from earlier made a remark about how Narad was going to get stinking rich. Satyabhama looked at me with an appeal in her eye. Honestly, I have no need for any gold, and I didn't really want any of it. But Krishna encouraged me to demand my share, so I did. Satyabhama wouldn't give up either. She pulled out the emergency broadcast system and made an announcement to the other 16,107 wives. She needed their help. If they all wanted to keep Krishna here, she needed every bit of gold and silver that they could find. There was a flurry of motion, as every one of the wives seemed to be going around searching for gold and silver. Except Rukmini. She came straight to where we were. "What's this that I hear?" she asked. She was understandably upset. She was one of Krishna's principal wives. Why wasn't she told earlier that Narad was trying to steal Krishna? So then Satyabhama had to tell her the whole story. Rukmini heard it and was silent for a couple of minutes. Then she asked me, "Why do you want Krishna?" And I honestly answered that it was because I admired him and was devoted to him. That seemed to be the answer that Rukmini expected. She said, "Satyabhama, I like your idea of offering an equivalent value instead of Krishna himself. We can't give him away, and certainly not to Narad. No offense, Narad." "None taken," I said, and I meant it. Rukmini is a straight shooter. She doesn't sugarcoat her words, and that is fine with me, because she means well. Rukmini continued, "Satyabhama, you can ask your maids to take all the gold back. I'll be back in a minute with Narad's gift." She took less than a minute. It took much longer for all the gold to be removed from the scales. I couldn't see what Rukmini brought back. She kept it hidden in the palm of her hand. When the scales were ready again, Rukmini placed a single tulsi leaf on the pan, and immediately the scales balanced. She explained, "The scales weren't balancing Krishna's weight against the weight of material wealth. They were balancing symbols of love and devotion. That tulsi leaf comes from a plant that I worship all the while when I'm thinking about Krishna. The single leaf has my love and devotion in it. The same love and devotion that motivated Narad to ask for Krishna in the first place." So there you have it. Rukmini had resolved this quite gracefully. Krishna got to stay back. I was happy. I didn't actually want gold anyway. I didn't get Krishna to go with me everywhere. But I wasn't exactly expecting to. Satyabhama wasn't totally embarrassed because Rukmini actually praised her for talking me into accepting an equivalent value. Krishna was happy as well because what was needed at that moment was for Rukmini to get a slight edge over Satyabhama. And the junior wife, the one with the disapproving look, she was happy too because I said my goodbye and left. You might call it a little bit of spite or whatever, but I may have further delayed the Amazon delivery guy that she was so eagerly waiting for. Under the circumstances, it would have been injudicious not to have done that. That's all for now. It's interesting that what spurred me on in my mad quest to get Krishna was the same love and devotion that also stopped my mad quest. There's an interesting story about Satyabhama's marriage with Krishna. It features a magical ruby called the Syamantak, and the quest to find it is a thrilling tale of adventure and suspense. I've already gotten a request for it, so I will cover it at some point in an upcoming episode. That's all for now. In the next episode, we'll do the Kathasarit Sagar story as I'd previously planned. If you have any comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories that you'd like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com, or reply to the questions on Spotify's Q&A. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook, and on X. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. A big thank you to each and every one of you for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.